Very good afternoon to you, and thank you very much for coming to my presentation. My name is Masaki Oda from Tamaga University in Tokyo. I'm currently a vice president for membership for Asia TEFL. I teach applied linguistics, and until March this year, I had been the director for Center for English as a Lingua Franca at Tamaga University. So my talk today is based on my reflection for my 6 years as a director at the program. Let's begin. When I had been asked by the executive board of university to establish a campus-wide language program, I tried to do my best and try to use my knowledge or experience as the English language teaching professional to start with. So like the conference theme and the various theme of the presentation, this particular conference or anything like this, there are plenty of research about learners, teachers, and materials. And in recent years, many colleagues are talking about language policy and its relation, its effect to the actual classroom practice. However, there are some areas which had been unknown to me, like finance, for example, facility, more administrative things. So I tried to look for the references within the English language profession. And surprisingly, 8 years ago, there had been very, very few studies, if any, available. So I had to rely on the areas outside the discipline. And in establishing a program, I also had to take the social atmosphere into consideration. So this was really a kind of tough job for me. But as someone who had been in the language teaching profession, I started off with like how to attract students. So I was thinking about what are the resources, both human resources like teachers, for example, administrators, as well as facility would be needed to establish a new program. And then I worked with a team and tried to optimize it with the needs of students as well as the reality, which is like financial resources available. You have to follow the various regulations, educational law, etc., atmosphere itself, and then try to at least make it satisfactory to the stakeholders, not only the students, but also the parents, general public, university community, teachers working for us, and as well as the society, so that we would get good evaluation, and then which would lead to attract more students. And this is very, very important for the private university like us, mid-sized private university, because in the Tokyo metropolitan area, there's hundreds of universities there in competition, and there's a decline of 18 years old population in all of Japan in recently. So, however, I overlooked, and I think many administrators seems to overlook the role of social atmosphere. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't take that into consideration when you establish a program, and I actually did that. But we are not good at be aware of this is constantly changing. So when you notice that there's been a change and the program becomes outdated, and it is too late. So let me just give you some introduction on the overview of the status of English language teaching in Japan. I said foreign language as a school subject. In the secondary schools, foreign languages are required, but it is not English. English has never been a required subject in the secondary school in Japan, and it's a foreign language. But this English is the foreign language. This monolithic view of English as the foreign language is prevailing. So that goal of foreign language teaching became the goal of the English language teaching. And what is the stakeholder satisfaction? And very often, the washback of university entrance examination and standards test. And this is very obvious because you got a score, you got pass and fail. So it's very obvious, at least this is a good indicator whether it is success or not, mission accomplished or not. So this become a kind of social practice, but it doesn't go the reality of like developing student proficiency. So in the past years, as you may know, the status of English within English language teaching profession has also been changed, actually more advanced. When I was a student in 1980, as a learner, English was the window to the world. This was the only language, and I was expected, students were expected to learn English in the university in order to become as good as so-called native speakers, using native speaker norms as target. However, because we are the non-native speakers, so you would never achieve it. So this was something, but you will see the world through the very limited so-called inner circle English. But in the era of world Englishes proposed by Bradshaw in 1982, I believe, English is recognized as a language for the different parts of the world. And so English is nativized, and sometimes English is used both internationally and internationally. And it's not necessary for you to use so-called native speakers model as the model for learning, and you have to respect the variety. So at least this kind of awareness is going on around the English language teaching profession. So you see English as a means of communication in the world, but it's still this is not enough. Then what happens in 2020, which is the current situation? Learners see the world. Learners are surrounded by languages in the daily life, not only English or your first language, but other languages. For example, if you are in the big cities like Tokyo or Seoul or New Delhi or Beijing, it is very difficult and almost impossible to live through 24 hours without any encounter with the language other than your first language. Of course, you might argue, you in the lockdown situation, you are at home. But if you are at home and using the internet site, you automatically encounter with a website which is in the language other than your own. So again, this is a reality. So English is one of the languages, or maybe Jenny Jenkins, she actually proposed in 2015 as a kind of a more elaborated version of English as a lingua franca. She said the English as multilingua franca, which means that English is a choice, but this is not very stable. It's changing depending on the situation. So actually, this is what Kanagaraja calls as translingual practices going on there. So you cannot really set the single monolithic model of English for your teaching. So what is translingual practices? Of course, it takes a long time to explain it, but actually, for the purpose of my presentation, the orientation for the English language teaching profession is started from like a monolingual orientation, native speaker has model as the model. It was in 1980 to the more translingual orientation. So we are going to that direction. So the problem of monolingual orientation, the people think that one language equal community and place. So like you have one nation there, and so you speak one language, and this is one language speaking community and one nation usually. And language as a self-standing system. And there are like 6 of them. You can just read it. But it is very interesting if you look at number 5, locus of language as cognition rather than the social context. So social context has been ignored. But actually, I said social atmosphere, but that is very, very important to determine what kind of English that you are going to teach for the satisfaction of the stakeholders. But then, what is a translingual orientation? Language resources are mobile, fluid, and hybrid. This is very important. So it's constantly changing. This is a dynamic process. And if you say, oh, we tentatively label like language, like Japanese, Korean, English, something. But actually, no, this variety, these labels may be useful, but this is a kind of very tentative ones. And the communities are changing and relational and inherently heterogeneous. It's not homogeneous. So again, now people started to realize this is a reality. And number 4, the translinguals are those who have capacity to use a language in relation to other cause in the society and their personal repertoire. So which means like a more language repertoire that you have, the better position you are in terms of communication. And actually in the real world, as I said, it's translingual environment, I think we should develop, even though we say our profession is called the label as English language teaching, but as a language teacher, we should aim to develop a translinguals for the better word, better communication. Okay, now this is the reflection for the Center for English as a Lingua Franca, which I had been the director for 6 years, in addition to the 2 years of preparation prior to the establishment of the center. We were able to eliminate native, non-native, this monolithic dichotomy in the hiring practice of teachers, so that students got realize that this is not really important. So English is a language, as early English as a lingua franca defines, like this is in the Barbara Zeidenhofer's book in the 2011, and saying that English ELF is used in the communication between those with different native languages, and when that English is the only choice that you choose English. Like I'm giving presentation in English, that's assuming that this is a lingua franca for you audience and myself. I wish I could present this in one of your languages as well as like maybe Japanese, but it's impossible. But doesn't mean that other languages are not important, or maybe it doesn't mean that English does it all. And also maybe this is not directly related to a particular presentation, but we were able to establish a kind of concept that it is like 4 skills, like reading, writing, listening, speaking. It's not necessary to teach them as a discrete skills. And go back to the hiring practice, still that many institutions, I see those job advertisement, native speakers only, native like proficiency, but being a native speaker is not important. And also I would say we stopped hiring monolingual, so-called native speaking English teachers. Of course, you are teaching foreign language. I don't think that it's logical that monolingual can teach, or at least there's a limitation. And also number 4, those who have never studied a foreign language at the advanced level, I don't think they understand what the students go through. So these are minimal requirements. However, I realize now the social atmosphere has been different, changing since the time that we had established the program. So the future direction is the developing abilities to use English because as far as we are in the English language teaching profession, this is we are level in relation to other codes in the society, both the linguistic and maybe non-linguistic aspects, because it's a multimodal world, and their personal repertoires. So English language program after 2020 would be the departure from monolingual orientation, I would say continuing departure from monolingual orientation, translingual practices, and develop learners to become translingual. So I would say our prevailing definition of multilingual or bilingual is not enough. And constant reflection and adjustment as language resources are mobile, fluid, and hybrid. And communities, discourse community, world is changing constantly. But you cannot do that radically. So you really have to plan very well. 3 phases of EIL, English as an international language, where teaching education, the Bayard and Sifakis in 2017 that they proposed are phase 1 exposure. So have to make them realize that this is the world. This is how the world is looking like. So teachers and of course administrators has to be very, very sensitive about this changing world. And critical awareness. You have to look at and you have to have an attitude to critically examine that what is going on there and make necessary suggestion adjustment and by taking action. So in conclusion, this is what I usually present at the end of my presentation. This is Henry Widdowson's 1994, The Ownership of English, and we quoted this. This is the wall of Center for English as a Lingua Franca, Tamaga University. Real proficiency is when you are able to take possession of the language, turn it to your advantage, and make it real for you. What does it mean by real proficiency? So my conclusion is, all of us who are in the English language teaching profession, whether you are teachers, administrators, policymakers, you really have to catch up with the changes, the constant dynamic changes of social atmosphere in order to make the programs real learning experience for the learners. Thank you very much. 감사합니다. And ありがとうございました。